Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. This is part 3 and possibly the final video on the subject, such as the atrocities that are taking place regarding the mandatory hijab laws in Iran. The feminists are going out and posting memes such as this, and you can see it on your screen. She should cover herself properly. And then you see, maybe you should stop looking at her. Maybe you should stop looking at her. And so this is a way of them. This is the number one argument used by feminists, that you should not judge women. You should not judge what they're wearing. And the Quran says, telling the believing men to lower their gaze. So their attempt is to do what? Their attempt is to proclaim the idea that women can dress the way they want. And then the responsibility is on the man not to look. Right? This is what they're saying. So apparently Allah got it wrong. Allah should not bring the hijab laws. Women should just dress the way they want. Men shouldn't look. Simple as that. But that isn't what Islam teaches. Islam teaches that both men and women are responsible. So yes, the women should dress properly. The men should also dress properly. You've got to cover your aura. The women also have to lower their gaze, and the men have to lower their gaze as well. Allah put so many solutions there to prevent any immorality in between the sexes. But no, the feminists only want to concentrate on men lowering the gaze. That's it. So it's their attempt to play the victim and blame the man. It's the man's evil desires. It's in his heart that he's got all these lustful desires. He can't control his emotions. You lower your gaze. Why are you telling women what to do? So again, it's that same feminist ideology being pushed through the Muslim Ummah. So I engaged a person called Ibrahim Mushtaq, who says, listen, he's defending the feminist position here. He says, quote, lots of misogynistic in the comments, getting triggered over the lower gaze statement. So I responded with profanity, in the sense to make an example. Listen to what I said. I said, if people are not responsible for how they dress, then I'm going to pull down my pants, walk naked in front of your wife. If you get upset, I'll just tell you and your wife to lower their gaze. He starts laughing. He says, ha ha ha. Expected from someone with the intellect of a clown. He's depicting me as a clown. He says, I didn't talk about dressing, but acknowledging how morons get mad over the lower of your gaze statement, as you did, and he starts laughing, which is equally as important as the dress code. I'm not at a marriage age, but if you try to harass any woman near my site, you'd get a head split. Oh, okay. Tough guy. So I responded back by saying, no one got mad at lowering the gaze. That's you being a clown. The original post clearly instructs, maybe you should lower your gaze. So instead of questioning the women's clothing, he points the finger at only lower the gaze, which is what feminists do. It seems you're the one being triggered here. So how about grow up and understand the context? He responds back and says, and by the way, folks, this is going to get really interesting because we're going to start talking about Iran, what's happening with the women in Iran. But this is all related, okay? Because their whole philosophy of feminism is about men cannot tell us what to do, and we should be able to dress the way we want to be dressed. It's our freedom of choice. And their attempt to downplay the hijab, downplay the mandatory hijab laws. It's their way of being a wretched feminist, being a naked feminist. Do what I want. I don't care if it breaks Islamic laws. Ibrahim says, no, many are getting triggered over it just like you. That's probably because of your ignorance and also because you're a moron, most likely. Look at the insults. See, they will continue to bash insults when they're losing an argument. Do your part and they should do theirs. Morons like you get mad when you have to adhere to the principles because you're ignorant and pretty stupid. Notice, they will constantly send insults. In the post, the girl is dressed modestly, but it is still being targeted by misogynist fools who have a superiority complex just like you. I'm not triggered, but you are since you replied earlier like a clown you are. Let him keep abusing and insulting. Watch how, when I start refuting him, he starts to calm down in his tone. He understands that the guy he's trying to mess with isn't just a moron. He says, I'm not triggered, but you, since you replied earlier like a clown that you are very ignorant for a 40-something-year-old. Again, he's following me, 40-something-year-old. Again, dress appropriately and lower your gaze not to go one way. It's that simple. My response. Excuse me? So you're saying half covering her head is modest to you? Because if you go back to the picture, half her hijab is open in the meme. I said, excuse me? So you're saying half covering her head is modesty to you? Well, that's not acceptable under Islam. And Islamic modesty for women is to cover the whole hair. It seems you're the one being triggered and carrying on. Seems you're no different from the feminists who also claim half a hijab is part of women's modesty. Read the post. Many feminists use the same line. The post does not address both parties, only the man who is judging her clothing. That's exactly what progressive liberal feminists do. Instead of addressing both men and women, they only focus on the man's responsibilities, as the post clearly indicates. If the post was addressing both individuals, then it would advise both parties, but it doesn't do that, does it? When your point doesn't hold up, your tactic is to use a fallacy known as poisoning the well, which is a debate fallacy known as to name call someone as being a misogynist in order to discredit everything else they have to say about the matter. But I don't blame the new generation. You are from a generation, because he said I'm 40 years old. He's obviously from a younger generation. So he's obviously from the generation that identifies themselves as a duck mermaid feminist. Ibrahim writes back and says, wait, so you are saying that a woman should expect harassment if she doesn't cover her head? No, again, I'm not saying that. See how he was playing manipulation, adding things to me that I didn't say. He says, sure, it's on her to dress modestly, but it's also your work to not get wrong ideas seeing any and every girl. The post is good because the father asked those idiots to not eye candy his daughter. You have a very extremist mindset, it appears. Well, notice, extremist mindset. No, you're triggered because I pointed out how people like you got triggered over this post. You folks don't have much of an idea about Islam. Just twist it to fit your own narrative. Not saying I'm a scholar. Oh, okay. But inshallah would learn more and hopefully you and everyone else as well. He says, the so-called feminists you are talking about, ain't it? I just pointed out that the one-sided hypocrisy, because Islam is for everyone, not men or women exclusively. He says, the fake feminists you talk about are usually called feminazis, who are definitely hypocrite and very ignorant of basic female rights. But notice he attacks feminists, right? And this is the interesting thing. He attacks these feminists, but every line of his sentiment is to defend the feminist narrative. That's what's condescending about these people. He says, but what line are you talking about? The lower of the gaze. My brother, it's literally a commandment to lower your gaze. Well, so is wearing the hijab. What a feminist says, I'm just pointing out because a lot us men seem to forget our part. Just take, for instance, you literally commented about undressing above, which sounded very absurd. It wasn't absurd. I used undressing myself as an example to see whether you just accept lowering the gaze, or would you also command me to put on some clothes? So it was a very good comparison, and I can see that you have no response to it. Again, he says, again, I have no association with any liberal or any, just pointing out the one-sided narrative, which I'd assume, based on your dialogue, is the same from the feminists. Lost me there. Just because they say that doesn't mean we use their tactic. No, you do use their tactic. I think you missed the whole point of the post. See, a lot of men do all sorts of bad stuff, he writes, but expect the women to be all covered head to toe, but themselves would go on drink, zina, drugs, lies, deceit, blah, blah, blah. He then goes on to say, the point was that guys love to add the misogynistic element and use it against women for their own superiority complex. He says, Islam literally ranks everyone equally. He says, notice, remember what I said before? Remember how I said he ridicules feminists, but I said he himself is really a feminist inside. Notice his statement. He says, Islam literally ranks everyone equally. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I have to pay the mahr for a woman. A woman doesn't have to pay the mahr. There are gender roles, gender differences. Men are maintainers and protectors of women. Women aren't maintainers and protectors of men. So he doesn't even know what he's talking about, and he accuses me of being an ignorant clown. And notice, he proclaims feminism. He's here defending feminism. He's using their same narrative. He says Islam literally ranks everyone equally. He then says, you missed the whole point. I'm not poisoning anything, dude. He says, I name-called you because I found that I dropped my clothes part from you pretty stupid. It wasn't stupid at all. It, quite frankly, made a clear comparison between me uncovering myself and just randomly just telling you to lower your gaze if you question me for it. Just like you expect me to just lower my gaze and not question women for uncovering themselves. He says, lots of laughter. Imagine saying that women should cover, but then saying that I'll undress. Again, he's clowning around. Anyway, let's just go on. How do I address this? How do I respond to this? I said, this is my response. No, the post is not good because although you think it addresses men who behave in a sleazy fashion, it also fuels and supports the arguments made time after time about putting the responsibility solely onto the man and forgetting about their own responsibility. In fact, we often hear from them, and they quote, "Who are you to judge? Only God can judge." And I can assure you that most of these feminists come from hijabis themselves. In fact, the one who originally posted this came from a niqabi sister. When you spend enough time on social media, and I personally spend a lot of time among debate circles, and perhaps you are not aware this is the number one go-to argument of feminists. They use in order to point the finger away from women, taking their own responsibilities of their own. They constantly ridicule brothers as being a haram police. And they constantly accuse brothers that it should be their responsibility to not look at the woman, should not be told what to do. It's her body, it's her choice, and that God is the only judge. And they then bring up, is your sins better than her sins? So basically they play the victim and never once take responsibility. Instead, they protect the one who sins and in fact demand that it's their right. And who are you to judge? So when you keep hearing things like this on a regular basis, then one needs to ask the question, are posts like this fueling the narrative of feminists? The answer is yes. Therefore, it is not a good post as it fuels the number one narrative of feminists. He writes back and he says, Mustafa, he says, I don't think so. It posts the responsibility solely on men. He says he doesn't think it posts the responsibility solely on men. It'd be like that if the father politely asked his daughter to dress appropriately, but she'd go and ditch him, and especially under the influence of some blue-haired weirdo. He says, I get your point, but I don't think it is like that in any way. He says, trust me, a lot of people do treat women as second-grade citizens, which is against Islam, while they themselves are committing the worst of sins. But I do agree that a lot of fools try to propagate the idea that Islam isn't good, astaghfirullah, without the slightfulness of knowledge. Haha, yeah, he says, only God can judge me. I hear that too. Well, so if you hear that, then don't you get it now? He says, I do know some annoying hijabis, but also a lot of ignorance also comes from those stupid, edgy ex-Muslims too, and they're painfully annoying. They base their whole life in searching for relevance and attention by spewing BS. He then says, as for this post, I do think that we should lower the gaze, but from what I know of this context, it's more like when men go around passing comments against women. Trust me, that happens a lot in many countries. He says, no, I'm pretty aware of this, but this ain't it, chef. He says, I mean, at the end, it's you and your own choice. I think you're committing a sin if you see a girl without or with a hijab and harass her in a capacity. I think you would agree that it's a big no-no as per Islam. He says, the thing is, people should dress appropriately, but passing comments or harassing them is wrong. However, if a feminazi comes in and tries to change the commandments to fit her narrative, that should be called out for sure. He says, about her body, her choice, because here in South Asia it's used by people as a show to express the misogyny that women go through. For example, a lot of women get beaten domestically and even killed for dowry and other reasons. He says, some people coin her body, her choice slogans, while in the West it is used to some extent as an excuse to start an OnlyFans page. He then says, the latter is absolutely wrong and immoral, I agree. I say instead of pointing fingers, everyone should work on their own din while sharing their knowledge and rightful opinion to help others. He says, yeah, some do play the victim, but it's both ways. Oh yeah, I agree they protect them too. Again, bro, I understand your point, but I think you missed the actual point of this post. Notice he's actually toning down, as I predicted earlier. I responded by saying, I think I would rather live in a society where comments are passed, in the right way, of course, than in a society that's silent to sin. As Muslims, we are encouraged to remind each other, but I would want people to do it using good akhlaq and wisdom, of course, depending on the person. And I'll explain later on. If no one judges the apparent and open sins, then society will normalize them. Just an example. Would we all relax and mind our own business if we heard someone in public passing a racist comment? I can assure you the same feminists who swear to say only God judges will condemn that racist in public and embarrass him with strong, vulgar language. None of them will sit back and be relaxed and say, that's his sin. The judgment will come down like a thunderbolt comes down from heaven to strike the ground. These sisters are the first to judge brothers. Oh, look, we can't find men anymore. Why are all men the same? Blah, blah, blah. But when a man opens his mouth and criticizes women, beep, misogynist, beep, patriarchy, beep, woman hater. Read the report. In Islam, we are to judge the apparent sins. This is by Abdullah ibn Utbah, reported. Umar ibn Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him, said, verily people were judged by the revelation in the time of the Messenger of Allah. Peace and blessings be upon him. And the revelation has ceased. We only judge now what is manifested outwardly of your deeds. Whoever shows us well, we will trust him and bring him close. It is not for us to judge anything of his inner secrets. Allah will hold him accountable for his inner secrets. Whoever shows us evil, we will never trust him. Listen to this. Whoever shows us evil, we will never trust him or believe him, even if it's said his intentions are good. So notice, Umar ibn Khattab teaches that they were judging through the revelation. They were judging people. Umar ibn Khattab didn't say, oh, my sin is I also sin, I'm not going to judge. No, they judged. Even if they were sinful, they still judged people who are sinning. These checks and balances put pressure on society to conform to Islamic moral values. Going back to my earlier comment about me pulling my pants down in public, if I did such an action, I would expect moral police within society to correct my behaviour. If it means beating me with a stick or using a stun gun if I don't comply with orders, I don't think anyone is going to say this moral police are extremists and are taking it too far. As a community, a Muslim community, we all want to live in a safe space where we are free from being exposed to evil no matter what form it represents itself. If we are relaxed, then a little bit of hair becomes no hijab, and no hijab then becomes a little bit of neck showing, and then it becomes a bit of arms showing, then it becomes a little bit of chest showing, and before you know it, we have a naked sister, we have naked beaches, we have hijabi sisters doing beauty twerks. These things can infest quickly if it is not taken care of, especially in this day and age where profanity is almost everywhere, and not only is it everywhere, it's actually praised. Call me an extremist, I don't care, but when statistics say, for example, Pakistan is, for example, one of the biggest consumers of the pornography industry among the Muslim nations. Perhaps ask yourself the question, is it because we have become too relaxed? Wallahi, I even know a Muslim parent that allows her son to watch pornography, saying, well, all teenagers do it. This is a result of society not condemning evil and allowing it to flourish. By the way, I'm glad we can have this, what seems now to be a respectable dialogue, and share our views without name calling. I'm trying to give him a bit of credit for toning himself down a little. Ibrahim responds back by saying, that's the problem. Comments are passed not in a way to correct someone, but rather to assert dominance as an output of superiority, complex, while the commentators would be the first ones to commit sins. Take Iran, for example. Beating a girl to death for whatever reason was wrong and condemned by Islamic rules. We should remind and correct each other, but do we really think the context of this post was doing that? He says, yes, absolutely. Good akhlaq and wisdom instead of bullying and unnecessary judgment later, of which, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't appreciated in Islam. He says, it's wrong to go around harassing someone, but teaching others while yourself following it properly is the way. So yes, if a racist person goes on and passes a racist comment, it's wrong, and so is an old man harassing a little girl for wearing a hijab and not a niqab while he himself does haram stuff like, say, zina or drugs. He's kind of contradicting himself here, because he's basically saying it's wrong for a person to be a racist, and he's saying he should be stopped. But he's saying an old man harassing a girl to put on the hijab is also wrong. But he doesn't say a woman wearing a hijab is also wrong. Notice he doesn't say that. A racist person can be a racist, but that's wrong, and he must be condemned for it. An old man telling another woman that harassing a woman for not wearing a hijab, that's wrong too, apparently, according to him. But he never says it's wrong for a Muslim woman to open her hair and break the law. Says double standards. He then goes on to continuously parrot the same narrative. This old man could be doing zina, drugs, and all that sort of stuff, so he shouldn't be bullying another girl because he feels he's superior to her. You can't tell me that's not against the laws of Islam. He then says, if he speaks to her like her own daughter and gives her wisdom, I reckon she'd have a better understanding as opposed to what is depicted here. He says, both these men and women judge each other way often. People today have somewhat lost it again. He says everybody is running real hard and fast for materialistic stuff. The rest, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. He says, I think that when a man opens his mouth rightfully, it's all misogynist. Said by you is plausible, but it is really doesn't equate to my comment here, as I was just pointing out the hypocrisy of a one-sided. While I absolutely agree, it is also shown from the other side. He says, now to the Surah Al-Bakari. No, that wasn't a surah. It was actually a hadith. He says, now to Surah Al-Bakari. I posted a hadith. Anyway, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he doesn't know the difference between hadith and surah from the Quran. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was just a printing error. He says, now to Surah al-Bukhari report you just mentioned. It is true, but how is it applicable here to my comment? Well, it is, because Umar ibn Khattab is saying we can judge what we see, what is apparent. He says, if I see a woman or a man selling themselves online or encouraging people to do similar stuff, drugs, adultery, etc., obviously I'd form my opinion and judgment for it as an absolute. Well, you just agreed you will judge them. But a father telling a rude dude off for his daughters ain't brave. He says, yeah, that pant pull comment led to it being a heated comment. Obviously, you didn't get my point. True, we should live in a safe space away from evil. Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. So women should cover their heads. Women should cover their legs. Women shouldn't start twerking in public and causing all of this evil desires to creep into men. He says, I didn't call you an extremist after the discussion went mature, dude. Oh, okay. He says, that's the point. People say, for example, Pakistan, as you mentioned, preach a lot to women and abuse them, even here in India, and some claim to be the flag bearer of faith, but consume porn. They're not even close to being well versed with the faith at all. The rural areas harass women as a dude in this post consume porn. But again, you're missing the point. Yes, they're consuming porn, but what are you doing to stop that? Your argument is don't judge them. Your original argument was don't judge them. Your original argument is your sins are worse. So when you follow that narrative, how do you stop the evil? The evil keeps fruiting itself. So my final rebuttal to him is, look, we are somewhat going in circles. You can't compare open sins and sins that are apparent to personal sins behind closed doors. Because he tried to say, oh, look, these men telling women what to do, they probably drink when, they probably lie and cheat. But my response to that is, if a person drinks and he does so in secret, and then comparing that to those who drink openly in public is not the same. So you can't exactly say, well, a sister uncovering her hair in public is the same as a man drinking in secret. We correct and judge sins that are made public, and we leave the inner secrets to Allah. If we all said that no one can judge anyone, then what would mean? No one would be judged, and no one would be revoked. That includes judging racists. It's not wrong to tell a sister in public or a brother not to do drugs, for example. No one will say, well, you don't pray, therefore you have no right to judge me. Well, they can, but this does not mean you can't judge and remind each other to abstain away from sin. Part of good character is to accept the good advice, but part of bad character is to say, mind your own business, because it shows a level of arrogance when the fact is you're being reminded and the person that's trying to remind you is wanting your guidance. As for women who died in police custody, and we're going to go to Pakistan now, right? As for women who died in police custody, of course people are quick to judge this as a superiority complex. What they fail to realize is that this is another feminist attempt to shut down criticism. If Iranian men started drinking publicly and as a result they died in police custody, would anyone talk about superiority complex? It seems there's a double standard when it comes to women being judged. Yes, we don't condone the killing of women for not wearing a hijab. But to be frank, black people also die in the hands of police brutality. So do white people No one talks about superiority complex and so forth now, do they, when it comes to white people? Feminists think it's about men trying to play a dominant superiority role. But I can assure you that if Muslim men committed open sins, such as opening up a public brothel, they will most likely have a similar fate. If they resist arrest, it's not like Iranian authorities had a public execution set up for these women, did they? They died, unfortunately, under police house arrest. Stop falling for the superiority complex false narrative that's used in order to dismiss divine law. No one complains about superiority complex when men have to pay for women's mahr and not the other way around. But a man telling a woman about her hijab, oh, it's a superiority complex. Allah says in the Quran, men are protectors and maintainers of women. But He doesn't say that this is a duty for women. Will anyone say, oh, the Quran was written by women to favor women as a superiority complex against men? Clearly, gender roles exist in Islam. Those who complain about superiority complex don't complain though when they're fighting Russia, when Ukraine made it fard for men to fight and not women. No one complained about superiority complex now, did they? Suddenly they're no longer there to complain about superiority complex. By the way, did any of these feminists complain about superiority complex when the French police banned the burqa for women in France? You spoke about bullying mentality in public and that he should speak to her like a father would to her daughter. This is in reference to tell a woman to wear a hijab in public. That's really ideal, but I wonder now if that's even possible with people's mindsets. We are talking about wretched feminists who most likely have a hatred against the hijab and who are so indulged in their feminism that they're looking for an opportunity to remain hostile and ready for a fight. You can't simply say, well, you need to talk to these women like your own daughters. Feminism is a vocal movement. The same feminists started burning hijabs in front of mosques and ripped off their tops to expose their breasts in front of the masjids in Iran as their form of protest, and you're expecting the moral police to talk to these types of wretched feminists as their daughters. Sometimes you need to take yourself out of the delusional bubble. We are not advising women of the Prophet's time. These are very hostile, hardline feminists who blatantly and openly break hijab rules because they want to get into a confrontation. They demand this sort of attention as to demand change against mandatory hijab laws. So you're requesting the police to be polite with these people who have planned this attack on the government of Iran? These types of feminazis, as you call it, are the ones that hold up their phones and provoke the police so they can then go and get a reaction to defame Islamic law as being barbaric, ancient and oppressive. That's their motive. And here you are saying, oh, let's pamper these women like our own daughters. They are not our daughters. They are the daughters of the sons of the devils from the West. Wake up and smell the coffee, brother. We all know there's no more sweet talking. It's done. It's beyond that. And the hidden battle is there to fight to reform Islam. Therefore, they must be met with hard line, iron fist. Otherwise, they will tear you apart. That's the unfortunate circumstance. It's the way it's going to work. And it's the unfortunate circumstance because it is the power the media has given these people to try and defame Islam. The Prophet said, A time will come when the oppressor will be made to look like the victim, and the victim will be made to look like the oppressor. We are indeed living in those days. Now, Ibrahim writes back and says, yeah, it's full circle here, but it's because you're missing the point of the post and my comment. He says, lots of laughter. How is zina, drinking drugs, etc. in personal space better than telling a little girl off for wearing a scarf? He says, no, even in secret, what's haram is haram. He says, drinking and influencing people to do the same is not equivalent to a little girl wearing a scarf, period. He says, again, the old man wasn't telling her, but rather taunting her despite the fact that she wore a headscarf in an attempt to assert his misogyny. Of course, we should educate and help others, especially for din, but this wasn't done for that. It was a taunt, not an attempt to give good advice. She didn't say, mind your business. It was her father who recognized the attempt to taunt her daughter and did what was good, example, be a protector to his daughter. He says, yes, the woman who dies in the custody died in unnecessary demise, which she didn't deserve. They need to fix their hardline attempts at attacking people. Saying her whole death was instigated by feminists to stage the protest is not plausible. Black people do raise their voice. Why do you think BLM started? Bro, you cannot compare opening a brothel to a little girl wearing a hijab. That's awfully absurd. He said, I'm not falling for any narrative. I'm calling out for the hypocrisy which is shown, which you seem to miss. He says, tell me, how many women kill their men for not receiving mahar or abuse them? Also, mahar is commanded by Islam. Now you're being two-sided here. How is it any different than feminazis? Anyway, so also mahar is commanded by Islam. Now you're being, okay. Anyway, anyone that says the Holy Quran was written by mortal, be it men or women, is a clown. The argument shifts from gender to Islamophobia. Ignorance is deceit. He says, gender roles are given by misogyny isn't Islamic history. A lot of women who followed the principle but also stood tall. The first university ever that was still functioning was set by, guess who? A Muslim woman. He says, yes, the fact that these feminists zipped themselves when France and other European nations banned burqa and hijab is a display of obvious hypocrisy. Screw him. He says, also, these same Euro nations have a lot of Muslim people who face bullying. However, they decide their nations, hence the immigration. He says, yes, he should have treated her like her daughter and educated her, but he didn't because he's a misogynist fool. How are you comparing this little girl to these self-entitled feminists, bro? She's just a little girl, not a hardline feminist. He says, however, even then, it's recommended you educate them instead of going Andrew Tate or fight them. Guide them as you can and rest. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows better and best. They did what in Iran? Bare breasts in front of mosques? No way, dude. In that case, that's a mega ultra massive loser for them. Okay. He says, I'm not delusional. You are, because you're comparing a little girl who was taunted to self-righteous feminazis. Completely different scenario. He says, gosh, this guy speaks a lot. I'm sorry it's cringeworthy, but trust me, it's hard for me as well. He says, I agree some feminists, apart from the ones who actually fight misogyny and wasn't better for women, are hideous since they fish their opinions with additions of Islamophobia. He says, I don't deny that some or maybe many of them are just painfully ignorant who use these issues to propagate lies, ignorance in Islam, but I really didn't mention it here. You're implying I support it. Again, I just called you out hypocrisy of one side. You might want to smell the coffee and said, mate, I'm not denying that the devil is at work, but pointing out places where we can also fix ourselves. He says, Islam needs to reform. Islam needs no reform. It needs good and educated preachers. The reforms have kind of messed up of what was left of Christianity. Yeah, the media works tremendously to spew more Islamophobia. It's in doing it for decades, but still cannot and would not win. Hate to agree, but the time of oppressor as victims and victims as oppressors is in somewhat effect, but we can hope we can work out our differences while ask for mercy from Allah. Here's the response. As we keep debating this, you said, how is zina better than women covering their head? You're now demonstrating a lack of understanding. We don't measure sin by those means. Sins did in secret or done in secret show humility because it shows you're not proud of them. But sins done openly are a sign you don't have a problem with it and you're boasting about it. Take, for example, doing zina in secret and then doing zina out in the open in front of everyone. Are they same zina? No, of course not. So, a lot of these feminists, for example, they will uncover their hair. They will go out, and a lot of them will be proud about this. They'll say, oh, look, the hijab doesn't even exist in Islam. Or even if they believe it's a sin, they will open it and be proud and show their hair. It's a sign of arrogance. It's a sign of pride, right? So if you turn around and, expose your sin in public, then that's different from doing something in secret, because doing something in secret means you're not proud of what you're doing. You're trying to hide it from the public. You're trying to hide it from people. And so, of course, it's not the same as boasting about it. So obviously, that's what I was trying to say. But he doesn't understand that. He can't understand that concept, which is pretty embarrassing. What he said to his daughter was good. This is what he was claiming. It was protecting her. Yeah, dude, no wonder feminism exists. A father teaching his daughter it's okay to uncover. And I'll defend you when people do what I can't impose on you. Father with the skirt, fathers like that are the problem. They can't be a man in the house and set religious rules for his wife and his daughters. Most likely the women in his household have got it over him. You then keep going on about the old man said it, therefore it's misogyny. Suppose an old woman said it, what will the excuse be then? Excuse me? You admitted that there are feminazis as you defined how feminists can be. And now you're saying they can't instigate this. You keep washing it down, so she's a little girl now. If that makes a difference, you would make the same assertion even if it were an adult daughter. You wrote to tell me how many women kill their husbands for mahar. Let's talk. How many men commit suicide because women use the law against their husbands and deny them seeing their kids? Women are abusers too, and consider the biological differences. More men kill women than women kill men because of the biological differences. It's not about only misogyny. The Prophet said most people who are in hell are from the woman. The Prophet also said most of the followers of Dajjal are from the woman. Was the Prophet a misogynist? Was he an abuser? Was he harassing women by passing such judgments? Or does he get an exception to speak like that towards women because he's a prophet? When the Quran says women are to obey their husbands, when Allah only selected men to be prophets, was Allah complicit in misogyny? Seems Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Andrew Tate are sync in a lot of things. And of course, he tried to be clever to say, oh, you're comparing Allah with Andrew Tate. No, I'm not comparing Allah with Andrew Tate. A'udhu billah. I'm comparing the mindset. Obviously, Andrew Tate also believes that women should obey their husbands. That's exactly what Allah says in the Quran. Imagine a random old man said those words about women. Will you lose your shit declaring it misogyny? Or perhaps you will use a different standard but then have the audacity to talk about hypocrisy. Keep going, bro. Wallah, keep going. You're very entertaining. Okay, so So he says, so you don't measure the sin, but throw. Look, he's starting to swear now. Look how upset he is. He's calling it bitch fit. When an old man is called out for harassing a girl who was wearing a headscarf, he keeps going about, oh, this old man was harassing a girl. This old man was harassing a girl. Again, if it was an older person, he's trying to change it to a little girl. Suppose it was an older adult woman. Would it be harassing? What's harassing? Was he bullying her? All he made was a statement. He said that's not an appropriate hijab. That's it. He's trying to make it like, he was strangling her and trying to get it out of her, nonsense. Trying to make her submit. He says, you just expose your own ignorance trying to tell me that zina isn't as bad as it. Again, I made the point clear. I spoke about the difference between public sins, open sins, and secret sins. This guy is so incoherent, so deranged, he can't understand the difference. He goes, you mean that a bunch of women orchestrated the killing of the whole incident in Iran? Brah, you just mad women assuming, broke your heart, blah, 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 so on. Again, he doesn't understand that. He himself was saying that feminists are Nazis. There are certain feminists who are Nazis. And now he's denying the fact that these Nazis weren't instigating this attack. Where the adult daughters, it's little girl here, you just imagine, again, stupid. Yes, women are abusers too, not denying that most cases men's side, two wrongs don't make it right. You're just hell-bent, misogyny, blah, 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 honor killings and other. These guys are stupid. Sorry, I'm just paraphrasing what he's saying. When the Prophet ﷺ said that women are followers of Dajjal and hell, source, it, but then it's not enough for you to unnecessarily hate against women. Did your mother not love you? Again, there are many sources, and I actually sent him the sources, right? And by the way, below this video, I'll publish all the sources where it speaks about women following the Dajjal more than men, women in hellfire more than men, and I'll post the sources below this video. But because he got so nasty and he got so hostile that I had to close the debate here. He says the Holy Quran never says that men can abuse, hurt, kill their women. Again, I never said that the Quran says men can abuse women. He says Allah chose men prophets, but doesn't mean your oppressive opinions and treat. He says Allah did choose men as prophets. Well, that shows that it doesn't mean that men oppress women. It shows that there are gender differences. That's why I brought it up. He says, did you just compare Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Tate? No, I didn't compare Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Tate. What I compared was that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala believes that women should obey men, and that's exactly what Andrew Tate also teaches as well. He says, you tried being nice. Anyway, he went on and on. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of the debate. So this guy was so defeated. I sent him a link showing the complete gender differences and the sources of women being in hell more than men, and where women will follow Dajjal. You know what he said? He said he's not interested in reading the sources. Now, I actually abused this individual only because he started abusing me in the text. He was very, very, he used a lot of profanity. And because he gets angry. When you expose him and he gets frustrated, he starts swearing his mouth off. And he was denying that he actually said Surah al-Bukhari, Surah Bukhari. And, because again, this proves how ignorant he is. He doesn't even know the difference between the Quran and the Hadith, right? You present him a Hadith, he calls it Surah Bukhari, yeah? So he says, I said to him, you've embarrassed yourself. And he tried to make the excuse it was a typo. I don't know how you can make a typo mistake between Sahih Bukhari and Surah Bukhari. Right? That's not a typo. And so he goes to me, I said to him, look, you've embarrassed yourself. You called Surah Bukhari You call Bukhari, Surah Bukhari, right? And he writes me a text in private. He goes, I said to him, I can show you this. He goes, and go on, show me. You cannot, because I never called it surah. He goes, you're delusional. Delusions, right? And here it is here. This is him typing. He says, now to the Surah al-Bukhari. So look how delusional he is. Now, to conclude this, I'm going to show you how Ibrahim, the clown, how he backed out, right? He did not want to engage anymore when I started presenting him sources. And this is what's very, very important to these feminists. He's a feminist, okay? To these feminazis, you need to present them sources and watch them squeal. So the first one I presented was from... it's in Surah Ibn Hibban. I'm just joking. Surah Ibn Hibban. It's Sahih Ibn Hibban, right? It says, Abu Hurairah reported the Messenger of Allah said, if a woman prays her 5 prayers, fasts her month of Ramadan, guards her chastity, and obeys her husband, she'll enter paradise from whichever gate. And I said to him, please answer, don't run. And he starts laughing in the text, carrying on, right? I said, answer, don't run. If there isn't a form of patriarchy, if there isn't a form of where a woman has to obey the husband, don't run from this, answer. And he's running. I also showed him Musnad Ahmed 5353. It says, Ibn Umar said, the Messenger of Allah said, the false Messiah will come upon the marsh of Mariqanat. Most of those who go out to him will be the woman. Look, most who will go out to him will be the women, until a man goes back to his wife, his mother, his daughters, his sisters, and his aunt to shackle them tightly, fearing that they would go out to him. Notice, it doesn't say a man will go out to shackle his son or his brothers or his uncles. It says he'll go and shackle his daughters, his sisters, his aunt, and so forth. So the man has to go and shackle in chains the women, not the men. Shackle the women. Why? Why is that? It shows they have a problem in controlling their desires and their lusts. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said most of the women are, the majority of people in hellfire are the women. Now, of course, people say, oh, well, and I've seen a lot of the feminist articles, one is written by Muslim Matters, that claim, the reason why most women are in hellfire, it isn't because they're innately evil. It's because, the hadith is just giving them a warning that they shouldn't do these 2 sins. And that is they should give more alms, give more charity, and be thankful towards their husbands. We're not saying they're innately evil too. God forbid, because the Prophet's wives, the believers, they were among one of the best human beings on the face of the earth that not even men today could compare to them. But the question is, are they sinning? Men sin too. We're not saying men don't sin. Men sin too. But women are doing it more frequently, according to the narration. And the narration says why they're there. Because a lot of these people say, it's because of the population difference. There's going to be more women than men. Nonsense. The hadith doesn't say that. The Prophet would have said that. If the Prophet would have said that the reason why they're in there is because women populate men more. But he didn't say that. He said it is because of the 2 things. And he said the sins. One is they're not thankful to their husbands. They're ungrateful to their husbands. And 2, they don't do enough charity. So where did you come up with this population? And then I'll quote a scholar, maybe Imam Taymiyyah or something like this. But again, you can quote any scholar you want. But that is an opinion. And the fact here is this, that if we're reading the hadith, nowhere does it talk about population differences. It doesn't say that. The Prophet could have said that clearly. He could have said that the reason is because women outnumber men, but he didn't say that. Now, I don't care if you bring me a hadith and it says that a time will come in the end of days where there will be 50 women for one man and so forth. That's irrelevant. That's talking about the end of days. Yeah, it wasn't talking about the ratio of women being 50 to 1 at the start of the beginning of humankind. So if you're going to say, in the end of days it's going to be, that's irrelevant. So here is the thing, folks, and this is a difference between men and these feminists, right? If the hadith said there's going to be more men in hell compared to women, wallah, we don't have a superiority complex like these feminists. I'd say, okay, no worries, halas, I accept it. There's more men than women in hell. No problem. Men sin more. Fair enough. We accept it. We move on. But we're not there to compete with women, right? But women are always competing with men. No, it can't be that women are more than men. It can't be. It's either got to be completely equal. Or men have to be more than women in hell. It can't be the other way around. You can't have more women than men. It can't happen. They won't accept it. And I'm like, why? What is your problem, woman? And it reminds me again of Iblis and Adam alayhi salam. Adam alayhi salam was created by Allah, and Iblis was told by Allah that he has to bow down to Adam. And Iblis said, no, I'm not going to do that. Because Iblis believed he is co-equal with Adam. In fact, he believed he was better than Adam. Right? And that's what the feminists are. The feminists are doing exactly what Iblis done with Adam. The feminists are like, no, I can't accept the hadith to show that men are better in this aspect when it comes to abstain away from sin. No, we can't accept this. We're either equal or we're better than them. There's no other option. Men can never excel women. That's it. Full stop. This is the disease in the heart. It comes back to pride. And it's the feminist pride that these women think that they have to be co-equal in every single thing. But why? Why can't they just accept that in this particular aspect, they sin more than men? That's it, full stop. Just we hear and we obey, we accept it. Unfortunately, it is what it is. Iblis was created and Adam was created. Allah made one, pray to the other. Allah made one, bow down to the other to show that they are listening to Allah's commandments. This is unfortunate for Iblis. He had to humiliate himself in front of Adam. He had to prostrate and bow down to Adam to show, not that he was worshipping him, to show gratefulness to Allah because Allah created this magnificent being. And to show humility, he was made down to prostrate to what Allah has created, as in he created this magnificent, it's like applauding. You create a BMW, a Mercedes, and you tell the crowd to applaud it. You have a showroom, you have all these spectators, and you present the car, you untie the ribbon, you present the car, and they all applaud it. So Allah wanted Iblis to applaud it in the form of bowing down. And he refused. He said, I'm not bowing down. Because he wanted to be either co-equal or better than him. He couldn't accept anything less. And these feminists are the same as Iblis. They're like, we can't accept anything less. We have to either be equal or better. Again, this is the disease in their heart. Kibir, pride. Same thing that Iblis had. Wallahi, again, if the hadith said, wallahi, if the hadith said that more men are in hell, wallahi, we hear and we obey. We accept it. If the hadith said more men are in hell than women, wallahi, we accept it. I'm not going to turn around and make excuses and say, oh, it's because men overpopulate women, and this hadith was just metaphorical. It was just a warning towards men to do better. No, we accept it. There are more men in hell. That's it. Finished. Halas. Allah said there will be more. That's it. Finished. Then I posted this feminist another ayat. I said, ayat, we're joking. It's a hadith narrated by Muslim. It says, fear Allah with regard to women, for you have taken them as a trust from Allah, and intimacy with them has become permissible. To you, by the word of Allah, your rights over them are that they should not allow anyone whom you dislike to sit on your furniture. If they do that, then hit them, but in a manner that does not cause injury or leave a mark. Their rights over you are that you should provide for them, clothe them in a reasonable manner, narrated by Muslim. And I posted this to him. Can you imagine? The hadith is saying you can hit them if they make someone sit on the furniture you don't want them to sit. Someone you dislike sits on your furniture. You tell your wife, I don't want that person to sit on my furniture. And your wife goes ahead and breaks that commandment and allows that person to sit on your furniture. According to hadith, you can go and smack them. But of course, the Tafsir and Ibn Kathir and so forth, they say that it should be conducted in a light manner. It does not put any mark on her. No marks. You don't hit her in the face and stuff like that. It's just like more of a symbolic beating, right? And of course, you can put your hand on them. That's what the hadith says. Now, again, I showed this to Ibrahim. And he started carrying on. Look at this. I see that bitch of a woman you call your mother. Started calling me bitch in the comments. He's starting to attack my mother now. Right? Starting to attack my mother now. So, and this is how they get frustrated, right? This is how they get frustrated. So we're going to end it there. And the guy got so crippled and refuted that all he started doing is just attacking me, personal ad hominems, personal attacks, red herrings, and that's it. And he pretty much did not want to engage anymore. So thank you. It was a grilling moment. Thank you for being patient and getting through this. It needs to be done. The work needs to be put out there, and we need to continue to defeat these